So guys, I think the Nikon Z50 is one of the most underrated APS-C mirrorless cameras in this decade. And in this video, I'll be talking about why it is so much better than the Sony Alpha a6600. And if you watch all the way till the end of the video, I'll also talk about the Nikon Z50 in comparison with the Sony Alpha A63, 64, 6500 as well. So stay tuned to see why I think the Nikon Z50 is so much better. So before you bash me and instantly thumbs down this video, I've actually used for client work and my own videos for leisure. I've used the A6300, the 6500, and the 6600. And let's not forget the notorious 6400, and it's essentially the same thing as the 6500 with just a little bit of removing of the IBIS as well as a little flip up screen. And in terms of quality and what I've seen, me using the Alpha series, I think I have a say or two about how it actually compares to the Nikon Z50. First, let's get the biggest elephant out of the room, and the reason why the Z50 is better than the A6600 is price. So retailing for just the camera body alone, I'm not including kit combos or anything, is that the Z50 goes around for 700 USD for just the body. And you're looking at essentially 2x the price for a Sony Alpha A6600. So I can get two Z50s, Z50s in comparison to just one Sony A6600, and you're looking at both crop mirrorless cameras that do 4K, and that alone, if you're on a budget and you don't want to spend a double and you want to use that into investing into a better lens, Nikon is the way to go. And if you're more along lines of you have not of a budget, then you shouldn't be considering the Nikon Z50. You should only consider the Sony A6600. But I'll talk about the next factors of whether or not that price is actually beneficial to the actual resemblance of the camera body and the specs and what actually does better. Because one of the things, if you invest into the Sony lineup, is Sony is notorious for having higher expensive glass. And there's not a lot of pricing for affordable lenses in the Sony lineup. Whereas if you pick up the Z50, which is why it's so beneficial, is that Nikon has the F to Z adapter, which is essentially the backwards compatibility of you can use all of your F mounts into this Z camera body. So all those 35 1.8 glass you have lying around, or that 17 to 50 Sigma, or the 18 to 35 1.8 really fat and heavy glass 1.8, guess what? You can put that now on your Z50 and have that completely in 4K. Whereas in comparison, if you're looking at the Sony Alpha lineup, there isn't much in terms of lens selection, as well as if you do want something along the lines of like a G lens, looking at 18 to 50 2.8, you're paying almost around 1,000 to 1,500 for just that glass alone. And if you do want to have lenses for the Sony, you're more likely, if you're on the budget route, to go along the lines of having, let's say, a Sigma 35 1.4 or a Sigma 16mm 1.4 as well. So the next portion is when we're talking about is form factor, and if you're looking more along lines of compact and travel friendly, the Z50 is the way to go, because it pretty much the Sony A6600 or any of the other 6600s, the 65, 64, 63, you're going around looking around at 700 to 800 grams, whereas the compact Z50 is weighing in at only 500, around 530 grams. So if you're looking for a travel friendly, the Z50 is the way to go in terms of having more lightweight, in terms of whether or not you want to travel long and you're not lugging around heavy gear and extra batteries. And another differentiator from the Sony as well as the Z50 is the Z50 has an articulating selfie screen that flips down, whereas if you've known for the A6500, it doesn't even flip down, it just flips to the there essentially isn't a selfie screen that you can see yourself. Whereas the 6600, yes, it does flip up, but you already know when it comes to putting in a external mic for the cold shoe mount is that that screen is unfortunately blocked by your mic or your microphone, your shotgun mic, your lav pack, whatever it is. Whereas the whole point of the Z50 of why it articulates down is that you can actually see yourself. But yes, I know that if you put a tripod is that you will be ultimately covering your face because of the tripod, but there are certain workarounds, so it's a little, you pick and choose whether or not you want the screen up or screen down. But I think the Z50, as I'm getting used to using the articulating screen that flips down, is much more of a better use of that LCD screen in comparison to the A6600 that flips up, and there isn't an alternative unless you use something like your phone or an external monitor, and same thing also applies with using the Nikon Z50. So if we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the actual specs and performance, you're looking at very similar sensors. The Sony A6600 has a CMOS sensor coming in at a 24.2 megapixels, where the Z50 also has a CMOS sensor, but only at 20.9 megapixels. So if you're looking in full quality resolutions, yes, the Sony does have more megapixels, so it is a bigger or better quality in terms of picture and video, but to the untrained eye, there isn't much of a quality difference if I put up a 4K video in comparison to, is this a Sony or is this a Nikon? You can't really tell. The only way that you can tell is if you put this into print and you'll actually print the photos in 4000 by 5000 aspect ratio, but the reality is most of us aren't going to be printing out those big, large pictures. So when it comes to actually having the 3 extra megapixels, it isn't a much difference from having 2 crop bodies that shoot relatively the same sensor as well as the same megapixels. So when it comes to autofocus and performance abilities when it comes to video and photos, is that the Nikon Z50 has finally upgraded to use phase detection when it comes to, in comparison to its older DSLR counterparts, is that it used to use contrast detection. Now with phase detection, it is straight up there with any of the other Canons, the Sonys with autofocus. As you can see before, there used to be a lot of pulsing and hunting because it used contrast detection. Now with phase detection, I would say with the Sony, it is almost on par with the quality of autofocus. Yes, the downside of the Z50 is that it does not perform as well in the low light conditions, but if it's fairly well lit, it stands toe to toe with a camera that is pretty much priced at twice the price and does just fine in terms of autofocus capabilities. So there are a couple things that the A6600 does have the upper hand when it comes to the Z50, and this is something that you should know if you decide to purchase the Z50 over the A6600, is that the A6600, you're paying double the price, but there are some added benefit features if you use specifically video. Like the A6600 does have audio monitoring, so you have a headphone jack, so you can actually listen and monitor your audio, whereas the Z50 does not. As well as in terms of battery life, you're looking for, as the Sony upgraded its NPF batteries to use the Z-type batteries so they can have much more longer shots. So you're looking at 500 to 600 shots in comparison to only 300 shots with the Z50. And that is one of the downfalls of using a Z50, is that the battery life itself is not as long as compared to the A6600, as well as another feature is that unlimited recording time when it comes to the A6600, whereas with the Z50 you can only record up to 30-minute intervals. And at last, the Z50 unfortunately does not have IBIS, so in-body image stabilization, and it relies heavily on optical as well as electronic vibration reduction, whereas the Sony A6600 does have dual IBIS as well as lens optical image stabilization. So you're looking for more steady shots, but that can be easily fixed by using an external stabilizer like a gimbal. So those were my overall tech specs of considering what is better from the Z50 and the A6600. So you're looking at, I can buy 2 Z50s for the price of one A6600. So if budget is definitely a factor, you're not looking much in terms of sacrificing quality. They both shoot 4K in terms of video, And one of the reasons why I stuck with Nikon, yes, besides the fact that it does have the F to Z mounts and I can use all of my Nikon lenses and it's backwards compatible, is that the color science of the Z50, of me myself also using Sony, all the crop, this A6600 and the A6500 for work, is that the color science when it comes to Nikon is much more superior, in my own artistic opinion, much better than Sony color science. Because the skin tones on the Sonys, if any of y'all actually use a 6600, 65, the color of the skin tones just looks very unnatural, even if it's shot in S-Log or a flat picture profile. Whereas the Nikon's itself is almost, I'd say, second best, where Canon will be #1 for color science. It's pretty up there, as well as having proper exposure if you were put this on completely auto. And that is the upper hand for the Z50, is better price and as well as same quality. And if you were to invest in, let's say, a higher end crop or a full body, I wouldn't pay double the price for a A6600. I think what Sony was doing wasn't the most, maybe it's just marketing schemes, because if I had the budget, the Z50 is much more comparable to, let's say, the A6400, where it doesn't have IBIS, there's no headphone jack, and you're looking at about, let's say, $100 to $200 more from the Z50, and that itself is more of a comparison, and it's more like apples to oranges. So if you don't have, let's say, any Nikon lenses lined up, then yes, go ahead and pick whatever. You're not going to go wrong with both of these cameras. So in terms of the A6600, I would not spend that much. If I had the option, I personally would get the Z50, and I'm not biased. I've used both cameras for work as well as my own YouTube channel. And if I were to pay $2,000 for a crop body, I'd much rather have that money invested into, let's say, a A7C or a A7 III instead of a crop sensor. You're looking at overpricing, as well as you can have much of its predecessors like the A6500, but if you're on a really budget, but the A6500 is known for things like overheating issues and not having a headphone jack, as well as not having unlimited recording time. So realistically, I would only pick up within the Sony Alpha lineup is the A6400, and that is the true competitor for the Z50. And if I were to compare the Z50 with the A6400, I would go with the Z50 if you were on a budget, as well as you have a lot of Nikon legacy lenses, so you get that F to Z mount adapter, so you can look at all of and still use all of your lenses. But if you're a complete beginner and you want to stick with reliable autofocus, you want to be able to have that Sony look, then go with the 6400. But that was my video on why I think the Z50 is better than the A6500, as well as the 66 and the 6400 and the 6300. Let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment below of which one do you think is better. Am I wrong? Am I right? Let me know. And if you want to get serious about video, get my 1-hour crash course. Link is in the description, as well as the comments below. It helps me help you of figuring out how exactly do you use a camera, so it doesn't matter what camera you have, Sony, Nikon, you can still pick up a camera and use it. Get that course. It's me teaching you how to be a better video person in this digital age. And my name is Peter. You're watching Broke Visionary Collective, where we all start with nothing, but you can always create something. Cheers, guys.